What's up, y'all? We back once again to dive a little bit deeper, to get a better understanding of this paper genocide. Now, today we're going to be reading from the book, Asian Slaves in Colonial Mexico. Whew. Powerful book. Powerful book. See, coming up in school, I was only taught about the transatlantic slave trade. And as we've been discovering throughout the past episodes, there's been a lot of misinformation. But to find out about the Pacific slave trade, oh man, that widens the lens. That gives us a better understanding. Now we could see the parallels and really understand the colonial work on a global scale. Oh man, this is powerful. So I'm gonna start at page 46. I recommend everybody go get that book and take a read on your own. I ordered mine off of Amazon. But I'm starting on page 46. I'm gonna skim through read as fast as I could. And probably slow down at because there's certain parts to me that are powerful. So for the sake of time, I'm gonna try to read a little bit fast, but let's get to it. So, page 46 on the first paragraph. Native elites were committed to the continuation of slavery because the institution was directly related to their political position, social rank, and economic power. We can see that today. Native elites rightly understood that the abolition of indigenous slavery would diminish their standing in the socio-economic hierarchy. The elites owned slaves in proportion to their nobility, so that the most powerful had upward of 100 slaves. Native chiefs were known, for instance, to walk around Manila. Whenever I see Manila, I think about the Thriller in Manila. Shout out to Muhammad Ali, rest in peace. To walk around Manila with a large entourage of slaves who held silk parasols to protect them from the sun. Data from the town of Bagumbayan, located outside of Manila, provides some sense of the numbers. In the 1620s, 400 out of 700 inhabitants were Indian slaves. Remember, we know what Indian is. The demographics show that having slaves continued to be a critical hallmark of social status among indigenous elites long after the Spanish conquest. Indigenous elites kept their slaves for more than a century because Spanish officials relied on pre-existing structures of power to administer the colony. A few Spaniards made periodic appeals to the king to free the poor Indians who were tyrannically enslaved by native elites, but such complaints were rare. Overall, colonists were well aware that they relied heavily on native elites and their slave labor force. Same thing goes on today. The Spanish government instituted the same forms of labor organization in the Philippines as in the American colonies. As I said, we're going to see a lot of parallels. First, allowing colonists to have encomiendas and then pushing for reform with the repartimiento system. Under encomienda, a Spaniard was allotted a group of Indians who owed him personal service. Repartimento was a crown control system that required Indians to work for nominal pay. Please remember this, because we're gonna tap back on these concepts to really understand how it's the same thing going on today. And like I said before in past episodes, humans always have some type of work to do on the planet. We have to remember that the Europeans are going to find a way to justify their actions. So whether it's working the land, taking care of the elders, the children, getting food, herbs, festivals, whatever it is, all human beings are going to have a structure in place to keep the society functioning well. Okay, so let's dodge their tricks when they try to make it look like the indigenous peoples were already enslaving. Their term for enslaving is just like today. We're enslaved now. We call ourselves wage slaves, and some of our leaders will sell us out. You understand what I'm saying? They still sell us out to this day. So it's pretty much the same thing back then. After like we've seen in different territories before, we've been studying Haiti and Trinidad and different places like that. After you do the most egregious things to the chief, and wipe out the military and you know, destroy the hierarchy or the system that's in place, you can easily have a puppet. So we have to understand that some of these times, or most of these times, there are puppets in place that would be playing along with the Spaniards or the Portuguese or whoever, whichever invaders are there to do trade. So anyway, let's get back to this. I don't want to dive too deep into it yet. Phenomenal pay. In the Philippines, both systems allowed for slavery because native elites were responsible for delivering the laborers to the Spaniards. Still goes on today. As such, Spanish colonists may not have individually owned Indian slaves after about 1610. But they continue to benefit from slave labor because native chiefs used slaves in food production for their own sustenance and to pay as tribute. Native chiefs, moreover, were known to use slaves for the labor draft. I promise you, to this day, we have labor draft, and they deliver food and sustenance to the power structure. The empire now is the UN, the United Nations, and they were always United Nations in Europe, but they were just different periods of time. The French and the Spanish and the you know, the British and whatnot, but they're all the same. But we're gonna get back to that. They just speak slightly different Latin. Food for as native chiefs with slave labor draft. The lawful enslavement of the group, remember, they have to make it lawful and just. But we know, luckily, we're in this present time, and we can dive back in and see what things have progressed to this day and understand what was going on back then. Maybe, you know, back then, the first encounter with the British or the first encounter with the Spaniards, you know, might have been they might have fallen for the manipulation. But us in the present day, we know what it was meant to, because we have seen what it has come to, you know. So anyway, the lawful enslavement of the indigenous group Negritos. This part gets so exciting for me because, you know, we were talking about the Maroons the last episode. So this is so powerful. Everything ties in together. The lawful enslavement, this is page 47, by the way. Enslavement of the indigenous group Negritos, also referred to as Zambales, exemplifies the leeway given to native chiefs regarding slavery. Now we're going to understand native and indigenous. The colonial government gave permission to the indigenous elites of the larger ethnic groups to carry out their own slaving raids. The Capapangas, or Pampangos in Spanish, for example, who lived in the fertile province of Pampanga, had license to enslave Negritos. Let's keep going. According to Kapampangan, this is tough for me, chiefs, the Negri, see why they just call us black? Something simple, you know, because a lot of the words we probably had before was a little bit too complicated for the European mind, you know, and a lot of us, we adapted to that. Anyway, the Negritos were naked marauders and scalp hunters who swept down from the foothills as swiftly as dead. It kind of reminds me of the Maroons a little bit. And now remember, we in the Philippines, so West Indies, East Indies. Hold on. They're both not too far from the equator, if not directly on it. Anyway, according to, Kapangan chiefs, the Negritos were naked marauders and scalp hunters who swept down from the foothills as swiftly as dare and attacked their people when they were in the fields. You know, they always needed justification. These people came down there and they attacked us. I'm sure they were attacking you for a reason. This is like when we were talking about in the last episode, when the Maroons were coming down from the mountains and attacking the Spaniards. I'm sure from the Spanish perspective, these were devilish savages just attacking and scalping, and doing all evils, but they were there first. You're actually encroaching on them and putting in a system of slavery. Anyway, when they were in the fields, attack their people when they were in the fields as a way to remedy this situation and protect the food supply. The Kapampangans were allowed to go to war against their natural enemies, enslave them, and put them to work in rice cultivation. So somebody allowed them. Who allowed them to do that? The Spaniards. Okay? So this is a play that they always use. When we study history, they always use it. To this day, they use it. They would have the original indigenous, and then there's a buffer between the Europeans and the original. And they're always melanated indigenous people who were there first. Then they would have sometimes a mixed race or even the same race, but maybe sellouts, people who they conquered, who they gave incentives, who they made treaties with, and they used these two people to fight each other. So it kind of, they could separate themselves from it, even though we know better now, and we could always see the evidence, because why are you there in the first place? Why are they giving tribute to Spain? So Spain is really in control here. Anyway, and put them to work in rice cultivation. This gets better, man. I promise you it gets better. The enslavement of Negritos, moreover, raises important questions about the conceptualization of slavery in the Philippines and how it changed over time. The word Negro is Spanish for black. So the name given to the enemies of the Kapampangans, I'm getting better with it, referred to their dark skin color. The name also alluded to the Spaniards' characterization of Negritos, which was that they were barbarians because they lived as hunters and gatherers rather than in settled towns, which was the Iberian mark of civilization. It's France and Spain and Portugal. So their definition of civilization is these settled towns. So they come and they civilize you. They take your land and they claim ownership of it, and they build their towns, and they have a hierarchy, and they enslave everybody, and they say this is civilized. This is civilization. And any of you who are in tune with nature and you live off the land, you are barbarians and savages. We know better now. Writing in the 1640s, Alonso de Sandoval gave the following description in his widely read missionary treatise. They are not as dark as those from Guinea, nor as ugly. Oh man, they said we was ugly. But smaller and skinnier, and with curly hair and beards like them, the Ghanaians. They do not have towns or houses except for the hills. Among the nations of the Philippines, they are the most... Hold on, we got to go to the bottom. I love footnotes. We always got to check the footnotes when we study, okay? The footnotes say, the Negritos, also called Aita, among other names, descended from the first settlers The first settlers of the Philippines. So over there in the Philippines, the first people were Negritos, dark skin, maroon. Because we say that, as he said, they're not as dark as those from Guinea. So there's different shade. Like we saw before in the last episode, there's different shade of the brown, the reddish brown. Okay? I'm going to show some footage as well as side by side as we could see some of the indigenous that are untouched to this day. Reddish brown. Over there in the East Indies. And they weren't brought as slaves from Africa. So we have to see the parallel. We have to understand if that went on over there, why would it not be the same over here? The indigenous people on the islands over there are reddish brown. We can see them to this day. And according to these documents, they were there, the first settlers, the original, the indigenous. And on top of that, this is right on the equator. We know better, but we have to dive deep so we can really prove it. Because a lot of people just cannot deal with the obvious. That these people born in the tropical areas of the planet would have the indigenous people as melanated. Okay? And they were all, that's what they all were there. It wasn't just from one continent. Okay? All right. Commonly, defended from the first settlers of Philippines, possibly related to the indigenous Australoid population. Okay? Shout out to the indigenous in the Australia as well too. We know the original people. It's not the Europeans. They just got there. These are the settlers, the invaders. Commonly described as pygmies, they lived as hunters and gatherers in small bands in the mountains, the mountainous interior of Luzon, Visayas, and several other islands. There is little historic research on this group of people. The scholarship mainly consists of modern-day ethnographic studies with some recent work on their genetic makeup. Okay, and they have the sources there. Oh man, I love the footnotes with the sources. We gotta pay attention to that. Okay? So getting back to it. So amongst the nation of Philippines, they are the most, let's continue. We're on page 48 now. Barbarous and uncivilized. Based on Negrito's physical appearance, listen to this, y'all. Spaniards associated them with the people from sub-Saharan Africa, whom they similarly perceived to be socially inferior. Let that sink in. These are people from different places, but similar looks, similar physical. That's what they said. Based on Negrito's physical appearance, Spaniards associated them with the people of sub-Saharan Africa. I promise you, that's the same thing that is going on, or went on, and is going on in the West Indies. The same thing in the East Indies is going on in the West Indies, in the Caribbean, in the Americas. Because the indigenous, like we said, we saw in a past episode when they dug up skulls, the oldest skulls found in the Americas are of Negro. We were here. This is a planet. Do not fall for the European okie doke that we only came out of Africa, and they came and they met in these other places. Some other people, some mixed race people, that's who they showed the depiction of. They met some mixed race people here, and they killed all of them, and then they got the everybody over here that's dark or reddish brown, it came from Africa, from 1492, from the 1500s to this day. It's impossible. It doesn't make any sense, and they're using that to cover up their lies. It's paper genocide, because if you knew that you were already here, ooh, they got some big problems. They got some big problems to deal with. Oh, man. So they have to steal your birthright. They have to steal the land right from under you. Like, nah, you wasn't here. Now the people who's here, they all dead. We killed them. Well, we didn't kill them. They died from disease. You know, they always need justification. They don't want to look guilty, but they're guilty. Sub-Saharan Africa, who they similarly perceived to be socially inferior. The Negritos were never incorporated into Hispanic society as indigenous vassals, or as were their neighboring agriculturists, because Spaniards saw them as savages. Shout out to my savages. Shout out to my maroons. Civilized Indians, therefore, had to leave to enslave Negritos because they were barbarians in the Aristotelian sense of being lesser men and therefore natural slaves. Spaniards, oh man, these people are racist. Spaniards made this characterization of the Negritos from the first years after conquest. Okay, right after they started conquering. In a 1570 letter, you know, we've been diving into the 1500s in the Americas. Same thing. Like I said, we have to see the parallels. In the 1570 letter to the Viceroy of New Spain, Governor Miguel Lopez de Legazpi explained that the native chiefs had black slaves who were war captives, noting that they used to be less expensive than Indian slaves, meaning slaves from the complex societies of Luzon. According to Legazpi, the native chiefs had recently raised their price because they realized that the Spaniards had an affinity for them and would pay more money for the blacks than the Indians. That goes on to this day. I'm short on time. I'm gonna have to do another episode on this so we could draw the parallels that goes on to this day. Indian elites thus recognized that Spaniards associated black skin with slavery and moved to profit from it. Legazpi, moreover, added that he had given license to individual Spaniards to take a great number of negrillos to Mexico as slaves. So New Spain is Mexico. Okay, all of this is New Spain. We have part of New Spain. We have the Cuba, Dominican Republic, and all of that. And we have slaves. They said they added that he had given license. They're given the license, so they're the bad guys. But they'll say, "Oh, your ancestors." They say the same thing about Africa. Your ancestors slowed you out. Well, somebody gave them license to do this. Somebody came on their territory, on their land, and conquered them and offset what was going on and forced them and have them making decisions under duress. You're not getting no pass by saying, "Oh, your ancestors did it." No. Now, we as our people, we will discuss that and we deal with that amongst ourselves because we know that they are sellouts in every culture, in every community, in every race. But the overall big bad bully, the original sin is that of the European. We have to call a spade a spade. So the Spaniards to take a great number of negrillos to Mexico as slaves. Okay, so maybe some of those slaves that we saw them bringing to the Dominican Republic to Hispaniola, like we were talking about, might not have even been from Africa. Like we said before, they could have been from another island. And this gets deeper. They could have been from the Philippines. The original blacks from the Philippines and Australia, that whole area over there. brought to Mexico as slaves. And then remember that if the capital of New Spain is in Mexico, they can divvy out slaves, or maybe they were rebelling in Mexico, whatever, and send it out to the Caribbean. How tricky is that? How deep is that? This is so complex. So complex. So, a great number of Negritos to Mexico as slaves, where they could live with Christians. Oh, this Christianity is so deep. Oh, so many episodes are coming up on that. Stay with me, y'all. The implication was that Negritos would have a better life in slavery because they would be taken out of their barbarity and brought into the Christian fold. I promise you, today we are in the Christian fold. We have been pacified. Like I said, extinct. We have been extinguished. Like I said, the Indian means conquered people. We have been conquered. That's why to this day, even if we look at the West Indies, these West Indians who have denied their maroonage, and we just have to call it a spade a spade. We're born into it. We have to call a spade a spade. We have been pacified, and we are deep into the Christian fold. I'm going to dive into an island like Jamaica, powerful country, powerful people, the most churches. You go to Haiti, you go to a lot of different places, a lot of churches, and there is a reason for this. This is part of your pacification. Oh, it gets so deep. This is why I start off the episodes by saying we're going to dive a little bit deeper, because it gets deep, y'all. Stay with me. I promise you, stay with me. Brought into the Christian fold. Notably, the link between barbarism and slavery was the same in other frontier regions of the Spanish Empire. Okay, we're gonna cut the reading soon. Y'all stay with me. I already know, you know what I'm saying? I try to keep it, you know what I'm saying, like within a certain period of time. But yo, listen, y'all, this is deep, man. So stay with me, y'all. Frontier regions of the Spanish Empire. Commenting on the Negritos of the Philippines, Governor Francisco de Sende wrote, listen to this, y'all. They are like the Chichimecas of New Spain, very savage and cruel. Once again, these are the indigenous people now of Mexico. All right, I put any kind of money on it. They were reddish brown. They were savage. They were coming out of the mountains. They were barbarous. They were attacking these foreign invaders who are here trying to force them into Christianity. Christianity has morphed into what we call democracy and different stuff like that, capitalism. They just come with their religious beliefs and their religious systems with their evil intentions, and they come in the name of doing good and justness to say this is better for you. What you're doing is wrong. You're a savage. You're cruel. What you're doing is wrong. And if you speak against, what are you, a communist? What are you, a dog? You're evil. They do that to this day, y'all. We're going to draw the parallels, though. Let's stay with me. The Chichimecas were nomadic indigenous groups from the northern frontier who were similarly exempted from the protections given to other Indians. To this day, they protect the good ones, the good Indians. If you're a good Christian and you're a good Indian and you're following the laws of the king, you're offered protection. And it's how ironic that they're protecting you from them. It's so deep, y'all. They're protecting you from them, but there's, a lot of people out of fear, which runs all of this, you know what I'm saying? They fall for it. For the Spaniards, groups like the Negritos and Chichimecas were not true Indians. They're not true Indians. They're not. But enemies who carried out guerrilla warfare on colonists and missionaries. Shout out to the guerrilla warfare, the guerrillas. Shout out to the Negritos and the Chichimecas. Shout out to the Maroons. That's what we call maroonage. The reddish browns. Shout out to them.